Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 197, Holloway versus Rodriguez. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com, and with me, as always, is Keith Schillen, executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, brother, man. I'm not going to lie, it was a little bit of a tough week. It's been really busy for me, so it was tough to get into it. A little bit of a hangover, considering we had back-to-back numbered UFC events. Then we also had PFLs put in there, Bellator. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff. But then I get to the main event of this card, and then I'm super excited again. So,
yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, coming out of UFC 267 and 268 the last couple of weeks, I would have been fine with a week off to kind of let all these storylines continue to develop. Like, there was stuff for us to talk about. We had a likely shoe-in for fight of the year that it's going to be in the rear view here in just a matter of days. I would have been fine with a little more time to digest this. Like, I don't need to go back to those like 2003 days of there being 3 or 4 months between pay-per-views.
Yeah.
But a little bit of a breather wouldn't have hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, but the train must go on. We got a lot of fights. We got some ranked fighters, so let's do it.
The train must go on, and we lost a bout from this event just today as Kyle Dawkins and Roman Dolidze were pulled off the bill. We've had all kinds of fights fall off of future UFC cards basically this week, because here it's finally starting to kick in that unvaccinated athletes are not being let into the U.S., which is why you're seeing all these Brazilian and all these, especially Eastern European fighters falling off cards. Anytime that you see a fight canceled between now and the end of the year, and it is, quote, travel issues, just understand that the issues are probably that they're not being allowed to travel here because they haven't got the shot. So,
yeah. How ironic is it that we have fighters pulling out of fights and obviously, as you're mentioning, not their fault or, because of new rules and everything. But how ironic is it that Yair Rodriguez is not one of the fighters that have dropped out yet?
I mean, we'll get to that because Yair Rodriguez's last couple of years have been an ordeal.
I mean, him and Zabit were rumored to be fighting each other for about 2 years straight.
It's like the poor man's Khabib versus Tony.
Yeah.
Like, it was just destined never to happen.
Yeah. Newer generations.
I mean, we're looking at 11 fights here. Obviously, the top fight on this card is an absolute banger. It's about as good as you're going to get for a fight night main event, really. A top 10 matchup that's almost guaranteed action. South of that, this is just another fight night card, but I think there are some goodies here for the getting. Like, there are a couple of really high-end prospects fighting. There are a couple of fighters who probably have their back against the wall, and that can sometimes pull an interesting, inspired performance out of somebody. What are you smiling about?
I'm smiling that we have a number one contender matchup you're not even talking about.
Oh, well, like, please.
I mean, she hasn't fought in 3 years, but Leah Letson gets one win and she's fighting for the title.
I was making fun of this on my other show because they were, they said this is the ultimate one fight card. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Spencer versus Letson might be the fight that puts its winner closest to a title shot in their division.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the stakes are high for Max Holloway and Leah Letson.
I mean,
I thought she was retired.
I assumed she was. I mean, I hadn't really thought of her, but if somebody asked me, I would have been like, yeah, I guess she probably retired. Like, dude, I mean, we'll get to that fight when we get to it. But if we're talking Saturday night about Leah Letson being the next challenger for the 145-pound title, just shut that shit down.
But that's probably, I'm not saying she's going to win, but if she wins, that's probably what we're talking about. And I mean, all joking aside, and I know we got to get into these fights, but we're kind of killing some air because we lost some. Who would it be if it wasn't Leah Letson? I Norma Dumont, I guess.
It'd probably be Dumont. Like,
so she's the backup. She's the person weighing in as the backup.
Yeah, I mean, Dumont and Letson.
Harrison? You sign Kayla Harrison for the PFL, and she goes immediately title shot. I don't know. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, The UFC is obviously very interested in Harrison since she was there at UFC 268, sitting right next to Michael Bisping. They panned the camera to him, said, "Hey, there's Michael Bisping." Pause, and then didn't say anything about Harrison, and like moved on to the next thing. It was such a diss. It was terrible.
And Dana White pretended that he didn't know that she was there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she got better treatment than Eddie Alvarez, who was like basically like pushing up against the barricades, like expecting to get, some sort of mention, and just got nothing.
No.
The temperature dropped in that arena by about 10 degrees.
Yeah, but I'm sure Dana didn't know she was there, because I'm sure the people who give out the free tickets and gave one to Kayla Harrison didn't mention anything to Dana.
I'm sure they're
yeah, no. Or maybe she bought a ticket. That's what it is. Kayla Harrison bought like second row. Yeah, dead center. Oh, I mean, she did make $1 million, so maybe she did.
Yeah, she. Shall we dig into these fights?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it, man. The first fight out of the gate at UFC Vegas 42 is a middleweight matchup between Kennedy Nzechukwu and Da-Un Jung. Nzechukwu, the 29-year-old Nigerian by way of Dallas, is 9-1 overall. He's 3-1 since joining the UFC out of his second run through Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the first season of the series, but was so raw, and I think he'd only had like 3 or 4 fights at that point, that they sent him back for some, they gave him a developmental deal, the same kind that they gave Greg Hardy after his first win on the Contender Series. Went back and won some more fights. He appeared again on the second season of the Contender Series in 2018, head-kicking Dennis Bryant, and was signed from there. He lost his UFC debut to Paul Craig by a triangle choke submission late in the third round. Stop me if you think you've heard that one before. He's bounced back from that with 3 impressive wins over Darko Stosic, Carlos Olberg, and Danilo Marquez. The most recent of those, Marquez, was back at UFC Fight Night Gone versus Volkov back in June. He'll be taking on Jung. The 27-year-old Korean is 14-2-1 overall. He's 3-0-1 in the UFC. Has beaten Kadis Ibragimov, Mike Slow Rodriguez, and most recently William Knight, whom he beat back in April at UFC on ABC, Vettori versus Holland. That was a bounce back from his only real setback in the UFC, which was a split draw loss to Sam Alvey at UFC 254. Odds on this one are fairly close to a pick'em, as befits 2 of the more interesting up-and-comers in the division. Jung right now is about -115, Nzechukwu -105. As just the slightest of underdogs. This is an important fight. These are 2 guys that have looked very good in their UFC run so far. Nzechukwu has had that one setback, but you know what? For a guy as raw as he is, I mean, he was tailor-made for Paul Craig to take a beating and just wait for his opening. Jung, similarly, he's beaten some solid people, in especially Rodriguez and Knight. Neither of those guys are bad. And he's a young guy, and he just got dragged into a Sam Alvey fight by Sam Alvey. I think like one or both of these guys have good upside in this division. My concern for Saturday is that this has the makings of maybe kind of a snoozer of a fight. Both of these guys' problem is that they're to my mind, they're way too willing to let the other fighter lead. And in Jung's case, that's really what cost him against Alvey. I think he's a better fighter in every way than Sam Alvey right now. But that whole split draw thing, what it hinged on, and for what it's worth, I scored the fight for Alvey, but it hinged on whether you thought Jung got a 10-8 round in the third round once he really turned the jets up. I think if he fought with that sense of urgency any earlier, he might have stopped Alvey or just won an uncontroversial decision. So I think that was a draw, or again, what I thought probably should have been a loss for him, based on just being too willing to accept Alvey's pace, and Alvey's pace is slow. Nzechukwu, aside from the loss to Craig, kind of similar. It's kind of like he waits too long to really get into gear. So I could see this fight kind of dragging for the first half. Between the 2, I am going to take the guy with just the better physical tools, even though both these guys are big middleweights. Both of them are athletic. Nzechukwu was stupidly big, except for Johnny Walker. He's probably the biggest guy in the division. And I've been saying 185 when I mean 205. Hopefully everybody figure that out. Yeah, these are light heavyweights. But yeah, give me Nzechukwu to win a decision that's not an absolute barn burner, but just be able to keep Jung at range with his long punches, with his kicks, and keep Jung from getting inside and kind of mugging him.
Yeah, so let me ask you this question before I break down the fighters. If we swap this fight with the co-main event, do you feel any different?
Oh my dude, that co-main event.
Like couldn't the co-main event be the opener and this be the co-main event?
Yeah, absolutely. Easily.
So I'm going to agree with some things you said. I'm going to disagree with some that you said too. So obviously the biggest light heavyweight, you mentioned middleweight, mentioned Nzechukwu fighting at middleweight, but yeah, I mean he's humongous. He looks like a heavyweight, 82-inch reach. I'm going to disagree though about him fighting at his opponent's pace. I actually think the opposite. Like I actually think he's a pressure fighter. I think he's a high volume, and I think actually kind of how he wins. You look at a guy and you think he'd win with, power and these explosion and all this. I mean, because he's built like a superhero, but he really wins by just marching forward and staying busy behind a jab. He's a guy who's big, but he doesn't want to fight from the outside. He actually wants to fight from the inside. He wants to crash the pocket and use his like size advantage in close, grinding. He isn't a big power puncher though you look at him that way, and his frame would suggest that. But to his credit, recently he did knock out Carlos Ulberg, who's a good striker himself. A lot of he's still kind of learning on the job. He's young, as you mentioned, when he first was on the Contender Series, and he has some mistakes. He pulls his head straight back, keeps his chin a little high. He does a pillaring defense coming in, so he's going to eat some shots coming in. But when he gets going, he gets his opponent on the back foot. You see like front kicks, step in knees. His clinch game is strong, just because he's physically powerful, plumbed. Gets in that Muay Thai plum with knees and elbows. I'd say he's a serviceable wrestler. I wouldn't say he's a great wrestler, but when he's on top, he's got some scary top pressure, scary ground and pound, just using those long arms to drop elbows and hammer fists. He's not a submission threat, and I would say his takedown defense is on the weaker side, but to his credit, he's really hard to hold down, probably just because of his strength. But he's got really good cardio. Now move over to Jung. We should change his name. As the Koreans always have a good name. We should change to like Southern New England Killer, as last two wins have been Dustin, my boys, Mike Rodriguez and William Knight. Jung, he's one of these guys that he doesn't, and I said this last time, I'm gonna say it again. He doesn't jump out on paper when you watch him. Like there's nothing he does that you're like, wow, look at this. But all together, like the little pieces they just come together, and it's a pretty well-rounded fighter. His hand speed is I'd say above average. He throws clean, tight strikes down the pipe. Good power. We saw his power against Mike Rodriguez. He can knock you out. Decent takedowns. I mean, he out-wrestled William Knight, who comes from a wrestling background. And then he has the cardio to go hard. And he's also one of these guys that he can dig deep. Like in a fight that's close, he's got to find a way to win. So as far as prediction goes, this is a really tough fight to call right out of the gate. Jung is the more well-rounded fighter, and he's probably the more polished, finished product. However, I think Nzechukwu has the higher ceiling, and if he can stuff some takedowns, and that's a big if against Jung. Jung has shown that he wants to wrestle, and he, especially against a guy that's so strong, put him on their back, and that takes away a lot of their strength. He's gonna have to stop those. He's gonna have to deflect some shots. He's gonna have to avoid some shots that he normally doesn't, because Jung has plus power. However, he can do that. I think his output alone, as you said, Jung is a bit of a counter striker and he'll sit back. Well, if he's sitting back and Nzechukwu is just valuing him, that could be the decision. Plus, one guy I feel is like showing more tools every time he comes out there. So I'm hoping he takes another jump forward. So I'll take Nzechukwu. I don't think he takes out Jung, so I'm going to say he gets it done by decision.
There you go. 2 picks for what is, as of Wednesday night, the very, very slight underdog in Kennedy Nzechukwu to kick things off in Las Vegas. Next up at UFC Fight Night 197 are a couple of promising young lightweights looking to turn things around in Marc Diakiese and Rafael Alves. Diakiese, the 28-year-old Englishman, is 14-4 overall. He is 5-4 since joining the UFC as a former Bama standout. Fought most recently last July, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Rafael Fiziev at UFC Fight Night Figueiredo versus Benavidez 2. He's taking on Alves, the 31-year-old Brazilian, product of MMA Masters, is 19-10 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC, fought just back in May, dropping a unanimous decision to Damir Ismagulov. That was his first appearance after winning a roster spot on Dana White's Contender Series last August. Odds on this one favor Diakiese. He is minus 175 or so. Alves around plus 155 as the underdog. Keith, how do you see this fight going? Who do you like, and how?
So, one thing I'll say about Rafael is I don't know how far he's going to go in his MMA career, but he's always going to be stuck in my memory as one of the worst botched weight class in the history of the UFC. In his debut, when he was supposed to fight at 145, and he missed weight for 155. I don't know if you remember that. I think he weighed like 157 or something. I think he missed weight by like 11 pounds or something. So that always stuck out. And then he won against Damir Ismagulov, and that is a really tough out in a UFC debut. So they kind of punished him for that. But don't miss out that this guy showed skills on the Contender Series to get into the UFC. Like, yeah, he missed weight, and, you know, he obviously is forced to go up to 155, but he does got skills. I mean, he's very athletic. He has a capoeira style, so you see some fun stuff. Fast hands, fast kicks. He can fight from both stances, which kind of adds to his unpredictability. He loves spinning attacks, but he's a little Jekyll and Hyde. You really don't know what you could get with him, not just on predictability of what he's going to attack with, but what kind of fighter he's going to have. Because in some fights, very aggressive, wild man, coming in, darting in, into range, blitzing, throwing a bunch of shots. But then he has that Yoel Romero, yeah, I did a flurry, and it was a 15-punch combination. Now I'm going to sit back and do nothing for the rest of the round. And we actually saw that in the debut against Ismagulov, where he just kind of sat back and just got picked apart. He has been rocked a lot because he can be aggressive. You can pick up his timing, but he can rock too, and he hits hard. And even when he didn't have a lot of output, didn't have a lot of success against a guy like Ismagulov, he actually rocked him briefly in their fight. So like that's the kind of power he has. He's well-rounded. He's a decent wrestler. I wouldn't say he's a great wrestler. I'd say decent. He likes to get inside, upper body locks, judo throws. He has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He has a submission threat. His subs that he likes are head attacks. So that, like, what we would call in wrestling, like the front headlock series. He's looking for guillotines, rear naked chokes, darces, Peruvian neckties. But he's aggressive where he'll put it in a submission and like roll for a gator roll and then end up on bottom because of that. But to his credit, he has some sweeps on the bottom. So he's pretty good on the ground. Now move on to Marc Diakiese. I just said that like Alves is inconsistent in the cage, like what you're gonna get. That's kind of been Diakiese's UFC run. Like he's a guy that came with a lot of hype, had some poor performances, everyone gave up on, and then suddenly started putting in some good performances and people like him again. And then he fought Fiziev, and it's like, really don't know what he is. This is a guy that some people thought would be like a top 15 guy, and that's because he's very athletic, he's very fast, but he makes some mistakes. Like he tends to throw single strikes, even though he's got some really fast hands. He can fight out of both stances. I would say he's pretty accurate. His straight right has some really good timing. I love that he's added going to the body. I would say his power is a little overrated, though. I would say and I know I've been already second fight, I've been kind of overworking this, but I'd say his plus power. But the broadcast team is going to make it sound like he's the 155 Francis Ngannou. Like if he touches you, he's going to put you out. That's just not the case. In fact, I actually think his best tool in the striking is his calf kicks. His calf kicks are phenomenal, and it's something that he needs to continue to focus on. I also like his inside game, slicing elbows inside, step-in knees. And to his credit, he's pretty durable. Like Rafael Fiziev is possibly the best striker in the division, and Fiziev hit him with everything. And Marc Diakiese, like, he was hurt, but he survived. As far as on the ground, not much of an offensive wrestler, but he's I would say he's a good sprawl and brawler. Like he's hard to take down, and if you do take him down, he has a pretty good get-up game. So, as far as prediction goes, I'm gonna go with Diakiese, but not with much confidence. He's more technical. He's also beaten the better fighters than Alves has, so that makes me leaning him. But based on how both these guys have fought, and you really don't know who's going to be stepping out there. We're going to have the good Diakiese, we're going to have the bad Diakiese, and then vice versa. We're going to have the good Alves, bad Alves. I don't really know. So give me Diakiese. I'll take it by decision.
Yeah, I like your breakdown there. There are two guys that have tons of promise, but are hard to really put a whole lot of faith in either one of them. So they're fairly close on the odds. You gave a pick where you're like, not a whole lot of confidence here. I'm feeling the same way. One thing I'll say for Alves is he is a great success story for MMA Masters. Like MMA Masters is a gym that's been laboring kind of underrated and in relative obscurity in Florida, like compared to like the superstar gyms in the state, like, you know, ATT and the artist now known as Sanford MMA.
Sanford. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're getting more shine now because, you know, Colby Covington went there after leaving ATT. But I remember Rafael Alves back in Jungle Fight. He just wasn't good. Like, he was a super physically gifted guy who just wasn't a very good fighter. And he moved to Florida, started fighting in like Titan and training at MMA Masters. And he really has turned around. Like, he's still not the most consistent fighter in the world, as you pointed out, but he's worlds ahead of where he was. Like, his record is like 19-10 because there was a time in his career when he was like a 500 fighter. And now he is, at the very least, if he doesn't have that top 15 ceiling, he's still unquestionably like UFC quality. That's just such a huge turnaround from the guy I saw like lose to like Wagner Hocha like 5 years ago or 6 years ago. I am also going to lean towards Diakiese slightly here. Like, I think he can match Alves as explosion and strength. I don't think he's going to get bullied around. I don't think he's going to get beaten to the punch. And while you're right that he doesn't have like one punch starch you knockout power, I think he's going to throw more volume than Alves. I think he's not going to spend as much time kind of admiring his own work. So I think this goes to decision. Be probably a pretty like some hard to score rounds in there, but give me Diakiese to take at least 2 out of 3 rounds in this one.
So just to jump in real quick before we're on, I was looking over here. I was looking at MMA Masters. Is that the gym that Mike Perry was going to?
I think he ended up at, that's not
the one where he hung himself by accident, right?
I don't know if that was MMA Masters, and I don't want to say it was if it wasn't.
I think I don't know. I don't think they're there anymore, but I think, and I apologize, and I 100% apologize to MMA Masters if this is wrong. But I'm pretty sure Mike Perry and Alex Nicholson were like the original UFC guys coming out of MMA Masters. If that was somebody else, again, 100. Trust me, from bottom
like, forgive us.
I apologize.
Man, was there a less surprising news story in combat sports this year than Mike Perry signing with Bare Knuckle?
No. It's still funny because when we used to do, I don't know if I can say this, but we used to do a show called Between the Links. It's now an MMA fighting show. Mike Heck was our host when I used to do a show on Loudmouth, which we would put it on Sherdog. And when Mike Heck went over to MMA fighting, he asked to take the show with him. And I'm such a nice guy. I said yes, but that was like the thing I predicted. Like, somehow we were talking about Mike Perry. I'm like, 5 years from now, he's gonna be fighting bare knuckle boxing. And yeah,
nailed that one.
Yeah.
I got to talk to Heck and get back on there. I guessed it a couple of times. I need to get my honor back.
Yeah, you were on when we were doing it, but you've been on when he was doing it with MMA fighting too.
I don't think so. Like, it's been at least 2 years since I've been on there. So yeah.
Yeah, he asked me one time. Listen, I'm gonna guys, cut this and send it to my Mike. He got me on there he asked me to come on one time since we went over MMA fighting, and it was like on like an hour's notice. I couldn't do it. But tell Mike he's scared to put me on there because he knows I have won that show more than anybody in history, and none of those bums over there can beat me. none of those virgins and nerds, or whatever it was coming to say. None of those nerds and virgins can beat me. Alice K. Lee can't beat me. Send it to Alice.
Man.
Can't beat me.
We love both Mike and Alex, of course. We now move over to the women's flyweight division for a matchup between Cortney Casey and Liana Jojua. Two women who, frankly speaking, could use a win this weekend very badly. Casey, the 34-year-old Arizonan, is an even 9-9 overall. She's 5-8 in the UFC. She fought most recently back in March, losing a split decision to JJ Aldrich at UFC Fight Night Edwards versus Muhammad. Before that, she got choked out in the third round by Gillian Robertson back at UFC on ESPN Blades versus Volkov last June. She'll be taking on Jojua. The 26-year-old Georgian is 8-4 overall. She's 1-2 in the UFC. Fought most recently last October, where she got bloodied and mangled into a doctor stoppage between the first and second rounds by Miranda Maverick. Before that, she defeated Diana Belbitsa by first round armbar, and prior to that, was knocked out with ground punches in the third round by Sarah Morris, and that was her UFC debut. Casey's a strong favorite here. She's minus 235. Jojua plus 195 as the underdog. Keith, I'll come right out and say it. Like, neither of these women is probably UFC material. They're both under 500 in the UFC is the simplest way to put it. And it's not as though either of them has beaten absolute world beaters. And especially in the case of Cortney Casey moving up to flyweight, because she was underpowered as a strawweight. That was her problem even as a strawweight. She was kind of fairly long and lanky for the division, but she got absolutely bullied in the clinch and on the ground by Michelle Watterson, probably the tiniest woman in the division. And so for her to move up, there's no question why Gillian Robertson completely ran game on her on the floor. Unless you're 10 times stronger than Gillian Robertson, she's a very, very good grappler, and Casey's not. Jojua kind of has the same problem. Just she has a good overall skill set. She's a good grappler. I think she's a fairly sound striker in what I've seen from her, but just doesn't have the athleticism to make it go. She just seems slow of hand, slow of foot, not physically strong when she and UFC level flyweights get their hands on each other. So at least their weaknesses kind of line up with one another, but I'm having a tough time understanding Casey as an over 2-1 favorite here over Jojua. To paraphrase you, if I gave this to you first, you would be like, I don't think Cortney Casey should be an over 2-1 favorite over anybody in the UFC right now. That's exactly how I feel about this one.
If someone's taken a wrestling class ever, Cortney Casey should be a 2-1 favorite against him.
That's pretty much it. And I can see Jojua, even though she's not a great wrestler, she's a good grappler once things are on the ground, but she doesn't have good entries. She's slow. She doesn't have the kind of explosion and core strength to make the terrible headlock throw work.
Yeah.
Probably even on Cortney Casey.
My question was, you said all these things about she doesn't have good entries, she's slow. I'm like, what did that have to do with taking down Cortney Casey, though?
I know I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but I see Jojua taking this. I think she actually will be able to get Cortney Casey to the ground. I think she'll be able to make the headlock throw work. I love it. If Cortney Casey wants to win this fight for at least 2 out of 3 rounds, she's going to need to keep Jojua either at a distance and kind of just pepper her with strikes at range, which she's capable of doing, but again, has never really made work against a good UFC fighter. Or, she would have to initiate takedowns and end up on the ground on her terms against Jojua, and I don't have any faith that that'll happen either. So I expected this to be close to a pick'em. I expected Casey maybe to be a very slight favorite just because she's been fighting better fighters for longer, but at almost plus 200 on Jojua, give me Liana Jojua all day. I wouldn't put money on this just because I have no faith in this fight, and if I put money on it, I'd have to sit and watch it. instead of like, go make some food. But give me Liana Jojua by unanimous decision in a pretty big upset.
Wow. Yeah. No, I get that. Like, the lines are so far off. So you mentioned Courtney Casey being out-muscled at strawweight, which is true. But then when she moved up to flyweight, she's still, like, looking at her, she's still actually one of the bigger ones. And she actually had to, I remember I think it was her flyweight debut. She originally missed weight and had to, like, do the second weigh-in like an hour later, and she had to get, like, take her clothes off and then made the weight, which was kind of funny. I'm like, wow, this girl's moving up in weight and she almost missed. So Courtney Casey, she's a striker. She's a volume striker. She throws a lot of combos. She wins fights with just being busier. And when I say wins fights, I mean every other fight she wins with just being busier. She sits on her punches, and I would say she draws some power. Like, I agree with you. She gets overpowered in the clinch, but I don't think she's like a soft striker. Like, I think she's got okay power for a former strawweight, now flyweight fighter. But she attacks with combos, which is good. Good kicks from range because of her like height advantage. But as we talked about, everything you say about Courtney Casey comes down to she's a terrible wrestler. She's has one of the worst takedown defenses in the entire UFC. But worse than having a bad takedown defense is she has no like scramble up game. She plays BJJ. She got a submission against Mara Romero Barella off her back, which was good. But I think it was like what do they say? You got the victory first, but you won the battle but lost the war because of it. Because now she thinks she's Mackenzie Dern and she's tacking with subs off her back when she really needs to be, wall walking back up and stuff. So sometimes it's weird. I've said this before. Like, sometimes if someone's BJJ was worse, they'd be a better fighter because they'd have more urgency to get up instead of playing BJJ and trying to get a submission.
Like how bad would it be if like Derek Lewis just like laid on his back and started throwing up triangles?
That's right. Yeah. Like, I don't know what Derek Lewis's jiu-jitsu level is, but if Derek Lewis was a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, he'd probably be a worse fighter.
Yeah, but instead he's like, "Oh, I'm down. I've got to bench press you off and get back up as soon as possible."
Right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Courtney Casey needs to do the same thing. Like, play the floor is lava game. Now move over to Jojua. The one thing I like about her, she's only 26 years old, so I like that. But it's hard to have any confidence in her because she's not a great athlete. Like, Courtney Casey is a better athlete than Jojua. She's also so extremely one-dimensional. Like, she's very limited on her feet. Her stand-up is ugly. She's kind of stiff. I would say she's a like BJJ specialist. So I don't want to say she's a grappler because you mentioned her wrestling's not good. She actually has weak takedown defense and stuff. And I like that you pointed out that Courtney Casey could initiate some wrestling herself. And I think Courtney Casey could actually win the wrestling. Like, Courtney Casey is a terrible defensive wrestler, but she actually might be the better offensive wrestler of the two. But Jojua also fights off her back. She's very flexible. She loves arm bars, and she can get arm bars. And if someone got a submission off the back, I actually would bet on Jojua than Courtney Casey. Another thing I do like about her is that she's a former Fight Nights global champion, so she can go deep into fights. As far as prediction, I have zero confidence. Like, I was gonna rant about the odds being so far off. I think it's very possible Jojua just takes Casey down and rides her out for 15 minutes. I also think it's very possible that Casey just kind of stays on a bike, does an out kickboxing match, throws into the air, Caitlin Chikagian style, and wins by decision. I'm going to go with Courtney Casey because, one, you didn't take her, and to make it a little more exciting. But I have no reason why. I have no idea why I'm taking her. I'm just going to take Courtney Casey.
There you go. Two dissenting picks with all kinds of confidence in the second fight out the door at UFC Vegas 42. Next up, it is the featherweights. Knock on wood, cross your fingers, as Sean Woodson takes on Collin Anglin. Woodson, the 29-year-old Glory MMA and fitness product, is 8-1 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. During that time, he has beaten Kyle Bochniak and Yusuf Zalal while losing via third round submission to Julian Erosa in a planned 150-pound catchweight fight. His most recent fight, the win over Zalal, was back in June at UFC Fight Night, Rosenstrike versus Sakai. He'll be taking on Anglin. The 28-year-old Michigan native is 8-2 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC out of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He had the ill fortune of facing Melsik Bagdasaryan in his UFC debut back in July. Got head kicked in the second round, finished off with a couple of ground strikes. In hindsight, it looks like Bagdasaryan might do that to some people before it's all said and done, but nonetheless, Anglin is still looking for his first win in the octagon. Odds on this one do not favor him to do so this weekend, as Woodson is minus 325 right now as the favorite, Anglin around plus 260 or plus 265 as the substantial underdog. Keith, does that line sound right to you? How do you see this fight going? Do you see Sean Woodson making weight?
Yeah. That should always be a win right there. Sean Woodson making weight, because he's insanely big for featherweight. He's got to be the biggest featherweight I've ever seen. He's like, I met him in Boston when I can't remember who he fought that day, but it was the Dominic Reyes knocking out Chris Weidman card. He fought on it, and he was like a foot taller than me. I was like, holy crap, dude, how do you make featherweight? It's insane. As far as this fight, you asked me if the odds are right. I think the odds are crazy. I think that, like, Sean Woodson, until he showed that he's not going to gas out late and he fixes that ground game. I don't think his takedown defense is terrible, but I think when he gets down, he's in big trouble. Until he's shown that that's behind him, he shouldn't be a 3 going on 4-1 favorite against anybody. He's a great boxer, Sean Woodson, like really good. He uses his length well. He just touches. I love that he just kind of snaps things out there. He's very accurate. He's got really good at picking up his opponent's timing. Nice jab. You stop moving into him, he kind of changes up the long range strikes to the short range uppercuts. He like looks to try to time an uppercut coming in. He's got big power. I shouldn't say big power. I don't want to say plus again, but above average power. He's got. He could put you out with one shot. One clean shot, he can put you out. He's not Francis Ngannou, he's got to put you out with a grazing shot, but he's accurate enough that he can generate power because of how accurate he is. He doesn't like pressure, though. And one way he doesn't like to fight off his back foot, but he doesn't want to be backing up. So one thing he does, he has that Tyron Woodley game going and the Anderson Silva, where he actually likes being towards the fence, where he kind of understands his distance going back. He also, I think he uses it to help him stop takedowns, which I actually think it backfires because you can't sprawl out. But he likes to fight with his back against the cage. Weak takedown defense. He also was submitted easily on the ground in his loss to Julian Erosa, which I don't like. But I'm going to say that was a little bit of him gassing out, which is always going to be the problem. He's a guy, when you see him at featherweight, you're like, dude, you just move up. Like, you'd be better at lightweight. Like, what do you lose? 1 inch of reach if you move up to lightweight? I mean, he could fight at welterweight. I think he'd actually do pretty well.
He's 6'2" and has a big wingspan even for a 6'2" guy. Like, yeah. I think he'd look perfectly normal right next to like Stephen Thompson or Vicente Luque.
Okay, so if he's 6'2", he's not a foot taller than me. Just for those, I'm not freaking Danny DeVito. I'm not the tallest guy, but
that's why his favorite fighter is Mighty Mouse, guys.
Yeah, the one guy I'm taller than. Me and Henry Cejudo. I am taller than Henry Cejudo, but Collin Anglin. Anglin's a guy that I liked coming off the Contender Series simply because, and I'm going to butcher his name, but he beat Muhammadan Naimov, who, when I was doing tape study on him, I really liked him coming into the Contender Series. So that just added to me liking Collin. He got a raw deal in his next fight going against Melsik Bagdasaryan, who we saw, he's a great striker. And then he's kind of got, like, I don't know if they really hate him, like 3 kills in a row, putting him against Sean Woodson. Like, I don't know if Collin Anglin did something to the UFC, but he not the best treatment. But he's elusive. He's well-rounded. I think he's got good footwork. I think his boxing's tight. He really sits on his punches, so he kind of generates power. Whips his punches, so he I don't explain. He puts everything into his shots. I like his left hook. He can be wild, though, and he has some holes defensively. He pulls his head straight back to avoid shots. He also backs straight up when he does. He doesn't like cut angles, which is a problem considering he kind of throws from his hips. So he kind of gives an avenue for attack by throwing nothing in front of him. But offensively, hard kicks to the body. I've seen him actually finish an opponent on the regional scene with a body kick. A sneaky high kick. I love that he fakes shots. He fakes his wrestling to open up his hands. But then next thing he'll actually start. Isn't an elite wrestler by any means, but he's a pretty good wrestler. He's got good takedown defense, good sprawl and brawl game. One thing I don't like about him though is when I was studying him for the contender series, I seen him fade into fights. So usually having cardio advantage is a thing that you use against Sean Woodson. I don't know if that's the case with Collin Anglin. So as far as prediction goes, I like both guys. I like Collin Anglin. I think he can smother Woodson and get some takedowns, and that's the avenue for victory. However, as long as it stays at distance, Woodson can really crack. I want to say Woodson just because of the physical tools. It's hard. It's just hard to look at a guy like Woodson and pick against him. But 3-1 favorite, no way. Like he should be like a negative 130 favorite. So I think he lands a good enough big shots to hurt Anglin. So give me Woodson. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say he finds a stoppage. So give me Woodson by second round TKO.
Yeah, you beat me to it. I like Anglin as well. Poor guy. I mean, he's had to take on Melsik Baghdasaryan and now Sean Woodson in his first two UFC fights. Both are excellent strikers, but beyond that, could not be much more different. Woodson is a very tall, rangy boxer who fights tall and rangy, whereas Baghdasaryan is like this compact muscle, like kickboxer who throws a lot of kicks and like fights almost even shorter than he is because he has such a compact stance and throws everything hard. In their fight, it was a pretty wild back and forth first round until just Baghdasaryan's power started to tell. Like they were both landing about equally for the first couple minutes, but Baghdasaryan hurt Anglin and then hurt him again and then punched him in the back of the head like 3 times. But and by the second round, like Anglin was already in a lot of trouble. I'm with you that if Anglin wanted to like really sell out to bring this thing to the ground, I think he could get Woodson down. Woodson's takedown defense is not great, obviously, but I don't know if he will. And I'm with you. Like, I think Woodson's going to be able to keep this fight at his preferred distance for as long as it's on the feet. And that stinging power of his will start to rack up, kind of like Baghdasaryan did. Like, Baghdasaryan didn't just wash Anglin with one punch. Just every time he landed a combination, you could tell it hurt. And Anglin started to slow down, started to react, and started rolling downhill from there. I'm with you. Give me Sean Woodson to win this one by second round TKO. We head back to the women's flyweight division for a matchup between Cynthia Calvillo and Andrea Lee. Calvillo, the 34-year-old, is 9-3-1 overall. She is 6-3-1 in the UFC. She is 1-2, however, since moving up from strawweight to flyweight. She is on a 2-fight losing streak. However, those two have come against Caitlin Chookagian and Jessica Andrade, both of whom were top 10, if not top 5 fighters at the time. The most recent of those, the Andrade fight, was back at UFC 266 in September. She'll be taking on Lee, the 32-year-old Louisianan by way of Texas, is 12-5 overall. She's 4-3 in the UFC. She won her most recent outing, tapping out Antonina Shevchenko with a triangle armbar in the second round at UFC 262 in May. That allowed Lee to bounce back from a 3-fight losing streak. Though, again, same as with Calvillo, those came to top fighters in Joanne Calderwood, Lauren Murphy, and Roxanne Modafferi. And the decision loss to Murphy was a controversial one for what it's worth. However, they both come into this one, again, 2 fighters probably in need of a win here. Calvillo is just the slightest of favorites. She is -120. Lee is available at even money, +100. Keith, who do you like in this one?
It's funny you were talking about Andrea Lee submitting Antonina Shevchenko, and I was just thinking about when there was like the narrative when Antonina came into the UFC that, hey, fight her, beat her, and that'll get you a title shot. Like that'll get you we'll build up Valentina coming for her revenge. I'm like, good thing the UFC haven't been like combined into that, because there'd be a long line of contenders right now for Valentina Shevchenko's title. So Andrea Lee. So let's talk about Andrea Lee. So she's a distant striker on the feet. She kind of wins with volume, just straight punches down the pipe, kind of a point fighter, not a lot of power. She's surprisingly like a plotter, which when you look at her physique, you'd think she'd be someone with like good footwork, but she's not. But she's got a lot of kicks in her game. She uses her length well with that. Good attacks the legs with her kicks. And she wrestles a lot more than you think. You talked about her getting a submission in their last fight. She's not a great wrestler, but she's just one of these ones she just will win a scramble. She can kind of be a little wild in the scrambles, though. She can lose the scrambles, but most likely that's how she gets it down. She's not going to just power through your hips to take you down. Weak defensive wrestler, though. And if you put her on her back, she really struggles to get up from the bottom. Now move over to Cynthia Calvillo. She's a girl that came in to the UFC considered a one-dimensional fighter for the most part, kind of just a grappling wizard. But I think her striking has come along. It's not where she wants it to be, but I think it's come along quite a bit lately. Can fight out both stances. She's throws tight punches down the pipe. She does well to keep her head bouncing off the center line. She's added some kicks to her game, but she lacks power, and I don't have like a lot of confidence where I think she'd win mostly a stand-up battle against most fighters in the UFC. But she can hold her own enough and kind of get respect enough to open up her takedowns, where I actually think her takedowns are similar to Lee, where she's not a great wrestler, though she does chain takedowns together. But again, hers is just start a scramble, and I'm confident enough, like when we're done, I'm going to end up on top. She's got some really, really slick back takes. And, well, obviously she's a submission threat. I like her ground and pound more. She has a mean streak in her. Like, and that's what you need with ground and pound. Like, ground and pound comes where, especially in a scramble game, where instead of looking for a submission, you're looking to create space to rain down some blows. And I actually think that's something Cynthia Calvillo does well. So as for prediction goes, I'm going to go with Calvillo just because I think she's the better wrestler. I think she can get some takedowns, and I think she can just outwork her on top. And that's another thing that, especially on the ground, I think she can do well. So give me Calvillo, and I'll take it by decision.
I came really close to going the other way on this one based on Lee's most recent fight against Antonina Shevchenko, because the dynamic that you are mentioning here, where Calvillo was probably the better wrestler of the two, I had to remind myself that what Lee did against Shevchenko, and I got to watch that from press row about 15 feet away. She was doing it against one of the worst wrestlers and grapplers in the division. Like I can't take her steamrolling Antonina Shevchenko on the ground to mean that she's like fixed all of these things. So yeah, it's probably be a really close fight, because I think Lee will probably get somewhat the better of it for as long as they're on the feet. She'll kick Calvillo's legs, kick her body, keep her at range. Lee is physically strong in the clinch, so if Calvillo tries to go there for takedowns, I don't think it's going to be good sledding for her. I mean, she's definitely a converted strawweight, just in terms of her physical stature. But if Calvillo can get in on Lee's hips, get single legs, force scrambles, I do think she'll be able to get her down. I do think she'll get the best of it there. And yeah, I'm with you. Not a whole lot of confidence, but I am going to pick that to happen. Give me Cynthia Calvillo by decision. Next up on the UFC Fight Night 197 prelims is a lightweight matchup that I will just come right out and say it, Keith. I'm super excited for this fight. I really like both these guys. It is a guy who's been kind of fast-tracked his own way into contention versus one of the more intriguing prospects in the division. It is Thiago Moises versus Joel Alvarez. Moises, the 26-year-old Brazilian, is 15-5 overall. He is 4-3 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. But 4-3 may not sound that impressive until you understand that the only losses have been to Beneil Dariush, Damir Ismagulov, and Islam Makhachev. So 2 top 5 guys and a guy in Ismagulov that, when he doesn't weigh, 210 pounds, is himself one of the most intriguing, nobody wants to fight up-and-comers in the division. And his wins include Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, Alexander Hernandez, all tough outs. So without any smoke or mirrors, he's just sort of vaulted himself into the edge of the top 10 really quickly in a division where it's generally hard to do that. He'll be taking on Alvarez. The 28-year-old Spaniard is 18-2 overall. He is 3-1 since joining the UFC just a little over 3 years ago. He dropped his UFC debut also to Ismagulov. Kind of a running theme here that Ismagulov has wrecked a lot of these people's days on this card. But he's come back since then with consecutive finishes over Danilo Belluardo, Joseph Duffy, whom he choked into retirement last summer, and most recently, last October, Alexander Yakovlev, whom he tapped out with a first-round armbar at UFC 254. Moises is a strong favorite here. He's minus 250. You can get Alvarez around plus 210 on the comeback. Keith, tell me what you like about these fighters, what you like about this fight, and who you think is going to win.
Yeah, that's definitely a fun fight. Moises, obviously, we last saw him. He was headlining UFC, so I feel like we've done a little bit more tape study on him than most guys at this point in a prelim card. Moises, he's known for jiu-jitsu, but his striking has come a long way. I think his striking is tight boxing. He has some pretty fast hands. One negative is he can be a little low output as he looks for single strikes, but he's got some pop in those hands, so he can hurt you. Good kicks everywhere, really. Kicks to the body, will stick one up high, leg kicks. He's sorry. He's good at setting up his takedowns with his strikes. Kind of going back to the last fight we talked about Calvillo, where Calvillo just needed to have something on the feet to set up those takedowns. Same thing, Moises. Like Moises' grappling will improve just from adding the extra threat of the striking. As long as, and this kind of happens with people who have a grappling background, suddenly they fall in love with his hands. As long as you don't fall in love with his hands, you know that the striking is the setup to your brother, your grappling. He's got decent entries, not a great wrestler, kind of a guy that'll just shoot on your hips. Again, we'll look for a scramble. He'll actually just shoot and pull guard. He's happy to be on bottom, where he's got slick submissions. He's got, I think, 6 career submissions. If he's on top, though, he's almost too confident submissions. Like, I go back to that. He'll jump to things. Like, he'll jump to an armbar that might not be there, but he's a serious threat if you give him an open. And then you go back to that Michael Johnson fight. And I know this was a while ago, and he's a much different fighter now. But when Michael Johnson was beating him, all he needed was one opening, and he jumped on an ankle and submitted him. And then a lot of people wasn't happy with the decision over Bobby Green. I think it was fair. It was a very close fight. But he also caught Bobby Green in an ankle leg lock. I can't remember what it was, but something on the ankles. Now move over to Joel Alvarez. He's long and lengthy. He has a lot of defensive holes on the feet, stands up tall, makes the mistake of backing straight up. He drops his hands, but his kicking game is good, like hard kicks. I'm not going to say Yair Rodriguez level. He doesn't have the athleticism, but like how Yair, most of his game is off his kick. That's how Alvarez's game is. But he is also a real good submission threat. He loves his head and arm triangles. He loves head attacks. If you give him the opportunity, you go back to he submitted Joe Duffy. He submitted, what was his last opponent? He submitted him quick.
Yakovlev. Alexander.
Yakovlev. He submitted him. So he's really is a submission threat. So as far as prediction goes, I'm going to go with Moises. I'm not counting the loss to Makhachev too heavily against him. I mean, like what Makhachev does, he just ran through Dan Hooker. He ran through everybody. I would say this is still a step. Obviously, this is a step down for Moises, going from Makhachev to Joel Alvarez. And on the flip side, Alvarez is the step up. So I don't know where Alvarez is better than Moises. Like, is he a better striker? No. Is he a better grappler? He might be a better submission threat, but I don't think he could win a straight grappling match. So overall, I just like Moises everywhere. So give me Moises. I don't think he submits I think he has a better chance of knocking him out, but I don't think he submits him. So I'll say he wins a lot of fun grappling exchanges. I know that I'm assuming that's what you want, and I think he wins a unanimous decision.
Yeah, I like this fight a lot. Like I said off the top, I thought it was a really sensible step back from Moises, and it was the perfect opportunity to give someone like Alvarez a shot at a name, you know, in a fight that made sense for both guys. It's kind of like it's surprising to me that Alvarez is 28 and Moises is only 26 because Moises, you know, like there's a certain poise about him that makes him just seem like a more experienced or like older fighter. Whereas Alvarez still, there's just something about him that screams, I'm 23 years old to me, even though he's 28. He has, if you look at his record, he has a ton of submissions. He has a ton of first round submissions. And he's one of those guys that has gotten away with some habits on the regional scene, in his case, the regional scene in Western Europe, that just aren't going to serve him well against UFC level guys. But I think he has plenty of time to change those and overcome it. Like what it makes me think of is a a lightweight Miguel Torres, where Miguel Torres won like 35 fights in a row just because he was so much better than everybody that he didn't care about position. He didn't care about being taken down. He knew he could fight an entire fight off his back and he'd find something. And that's been Alvarez. Like you mentioned how good his kicks are. They are the kicks of a man who is not afraid of being taken down. Like that's what allows him to uncork those, in any ranges, kick as hard as he wants. Because what he's learned all along is that, well, yeah, if you catch my kick and take me down, I'm just going to triangle you or sweep you and get a front headlock and throw an anaconda choke on you. Thiago Moises is not a guy for him to try those avenues to victory. Like you said, Moises is at least his equal as a pure grappler, probably physically stronger, even though Alvarez will be the bigger guy in the cage. And then the advantages on the feet, I think, do go to Moises. So give me Thiago Moises by decision, but I think this is going to be a really exciting fight, and hopefully we get some really interesting ground sequences. The 5-fight main card of UFC Fight Night 197 opens up with a welterweight banger in the making between Miguel Baeza and Kalinn Chaos Williams. Baeza, the 29-year-old Floridian, also a product of MMA Masters, is 10-1 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 3-1 since joining the UFC out of the 2019 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He opened up his UFC run with 3 straight wins over Hector Aldana, Matt Brown, and Takashi Sato, all 3 of those finishes, before running into Santiago Ponzinibbio this past June at UFC Fight Night Rosenstrike versus Sakai. There he lost via unanimous decision in what is still in the running for second best fight of 2021, as that was an absolute banger of a fight. He'll be taking on Kalinn Williams. The 27-year-old Michigan native is 12-2 overall. He also is 3-1 in the UFC. He opened up his UFC run last year by attempting to entirely depopulate Fortis MMA in about 2 minutes of combined cage time, knocking out Alex Morono and Abdul Razak Al Hassan. That before he ran into Michel Pereira this past December, lost a unanimous decision, but bounced back from that with a unanimous decision win over Matthew Semmelsberger this past June at UFC on ESPN Korean Zombie versus Ige. Odds on this one are close. Baeza is the slight favorite. He's minus 135. Williams plus 115. Keith, this should be a fun fight. How do you see it playing out, and who you got?
Yeah, so it's hard to pick who's going to win, but I think we can kind of agree on we're going to have fun moments, and then both guys are going to probably have some success. So Baeza is a guy that he's grown on me. Like, he was not a guy that was jumping off the page for me on the Contender Series. Like, he's a guy that I'm like, oh, he's a good addition. I viewed him a little lower on the card than he is. And, like, so the UFC had this big push for him ahead, and I was like, oh, that's way too much. And he kind of slid down, but I think he slid down higher steps up in the UFC rankings than I thought he was going to be. So I'm pleased that I think I was slightly wrong about him. I think I was more right than the UFC was, but overall, he's well-rounded. He's a good athlete. That's the thing that stands out to me. Lots of movement, good boxing. He's really added this nice crisp jab. We saw that in his last fight. Accurate straight right. He's got decent power. He can throw kicks everywhere. He's added in these calf kicks that is really damaging his opponents, zapping their power. So the offensive tools are all there. The problem is on the feet is his defensive tools. He throws defense right out the window. He's very hittable. He stands up tall. He lacks head movement. He doesn't like, and this is when Ponzinibbio had success against him. He doesn't like when the pressure's turned up against him. He wants to lead the dance. He can wrestle, decent entries, good ground and pound. Not a huge submission threat. I think he only has one sub win on his record. My biggest issue with him, though, is inconsistent. Like one fight, he looks like a world beater. The next fight, he's almost getting knocked out, or he does get knocked out. So, and again, like I'm giving him a pass on his last fight. Last fight was Santiago Ponzinibbio, one of the best guys in the division. So I understand we're grading on a curve with him right now. Now, move on to Chaos William. He's a guy. He's been a little bit gun shy lately. Like the Semmelsberger fight. Well, I shouldn't say gun shy. He played it safe against Semmelsberger. I think he could have turned it up a little bit. He might have put him out. But when he is turned up, he presses hard. He's got some big power. Hard calf kicks. He makes a mistake of throwing him naked, so he could get knocked out. And Baeza is the guy that could do that to him. He does drop his hands a little bit. He also keeps his chin high. But to his credit, he's got a good chin. He's been hit with some shots, hasn't been hurt. And I like that his boxing is tight. Nothing wind up, not a lot of tells, which is the best way to generate power. He's a good wrestler too. Not elite wrestler. He's not a Josh Koscheck like that, but he gets you down, win the rounds. So we could see some fun scrambles between these two. So as far as prediction go, this is a really hard fight to pick. I don't know what to think of Baeza yet. He had an absolute war against Ponzinibbio in a fight that he was winning early, which is an extremely impressive thing. But he also took a lot of damage in that fight. And he's taken a lot of damage for a guy who in a short run in the UFC so far. Now, Williams, on the other hand, I actually think he needs to have he needs chaos in there. He needs Baeza to kind of throw him down, because Baeza, if he just works on the outside, I think he's probably still a little more technical, a little faster than Chaos. I just don't trust Baeza's chin. And even though Ponzinibbio is a really good kickboxer, he's got a good snap, I actually think Williams might be even harder, pure puncher than Ponzinibbio. So I'm going to go with a slight upset. I'm going to say Chaos Williams knocks him out. I'm going to say he does it in the second round.
Yeah, I like this fight a lot for the same reasons you mentioned. I do agree that Williams seems to have dialed back his approach just a little bit. Like the most obvious example would be starting with the Michel Pereira fight, where everybody assumed that was just going to be the wildest thing ever. The crazy capoeira guy versus the guy who knocked out two pretty good welterweights in under a minute of total cage time. And instead it turned into a good kickboxing match, but nothing wild. And the Semmelsberger fight turned out very much the same way, only he won that one. I understand and I share your concerns about Baeza. He gets hit a lot, win or lose. Like, he knocked out Matt Brown, but in the early going, Brown was giving him as good as he got. And that was the molasses slow 40-year-old last legs of Matt Brown.
That's the fight I forgot. There was one that I was trying to think of where he was hurt bad. That's the one. A fight that he should have blown him out.
Yeah, should have blown him out. Takashi Sato, obviously Takashi Sato is a knockout artist,
and that was his best showing.
Yeah, well,
yeah. Go figure.
And he took some artillery from Sato, even though he was by far the faster guy. But then, what I found heartening about that was he shot for an unexpected takedown, landed it beautifully, took his I think he took his back and then ended up moving him out, but choked him out in short order, just completely ran game on him on the ground. If he is willing to do that at the right moments in this fight, I think he has a good avenue to victory against Calinn Williams. The speed and fluidity with which he changed levels on Sato and took him down, that's never really gotten out of my head, even after the Ponzinibbio fight. Because of that, I'm going to trust that Baeza, at a good camp, they must know that is something that he's going to have in his back pocket against Williams. Give me Baeza to win. I'm going to say I'm going to say he gets a finish. I'm going to say, third round finish where after, a back and forth kickboxing match, he does the thing he did to Sato. He changes levels, takes Williams down, and finishes him on the ground. Give me TKO ground and pound third round. Next up at UFC Vegas 42 is a bantamweight matchup between Yadong Song and Julio Arce. Song, the 23-year-old Chinese native, is 17-5-1 with one no contest overall. He is 6-1-1 in the UFC. Fought most recently back in August at UFC 265, where he took a split decision over Casey Kenny. That allowed him to bounce back from his first loss in the UFC, which was a unanimous decision against Kyler Phillips back in March. He's taking on Arce, the 32-year-old New York native, export of Team Tiger Schulman, is 17-4 overall. He is 4-2 in the UFC. He is 1-0 in the UFC since coming back from a 1.5-year hiatus and dropping from featherweight to bantamweight. He made his bantamweight debut in July at UFC on ESPN Sandhagen versus Dillashaw, where he knocked out Andre Ewell in the second round. Odds close on this one. Song is the slight favorite. He's minus 135 or so. Arce plus 110 or plus 115 on the comeback. Keith, you were telling me off air before we started this segment that you're super excited for this fight. I don't see how somebody couldn't be. Tell me how you see it playing out and who you favor to win.
Yeah, what I just love about this fight is just a really technically sound matchup. Like two really good technically sound strikers. Song Yadong is a guy that he just looked so good in his last fight against Casey Kenny. I mean, he's looked good in pretty much every fight in the UFC. He's well-rounded, technically sound. He's a composed striker, high output, good boxing. I think he's got accurate hands. I like that he attacks with combos, straight shots down the pipe, good at keeping his opponent at the end of their punches. Not a lot of tell signs, so everything's kind of short and quick. Works behind a popping jab, real good snap in his shots, good power. He's added calf kicks, which is every fighter should be adding. The only negative I could find right now, especially in his boxing, is he tends to be a little bit of a headhunter. I'd like to see him go to the body a little bit more, which would actually add to his power because it set up his power shots even more. But he's a good grappler. He's got 3 wins by submission. We've seen him win rounds with getting in takedowns. He was taken down by Marlon Vera twice, which is not good, but Marlon Vera is obviously a very good. I mean, he's a ranked fighter by us in Sherdog, but he's hard to hold down. Good get-up game. Vera couldn't keep him down. He also has good cardio. Like he had a war against Vera, and he didn't slow down one bit. And he looked, like I mentioned, he looked really good against Casey Kenny in his last fight. Speaking of look good, Julio Arce looked good in his debut at bantamweight. He went against a good guy against Andre Ewell and starched him. He's well-rounded, southpaw, sets up his strikes with a lot of feints, which, gives him a lot of openings. He also works behind a nice, crisp jab. He's got that clean, straight right. He's a guy that does go to the body, which is kind of his team's trademark. Tiger Schulman, that's something they stress. I mean, Shane Burgos, we saw a week ago going down to the body. Arce wasn't known for his power, but then we saw power against Andrea, which means like him dropping down, he's carried like featherweight power down to bantamweight, which I like. A lot of kicks, calf kicks, sneaky high kick. One negative though is he doesn't really check kicks. I mean, I go back to the Hakeem Duado, and I know it's a while ago, but Hakeem Duado did have success with leg kicks against him. But he's not just one-dimensional. He can sneak in some takedown. He doesn't want to grapple, but he can. He does need to improve his top control, but he has 5 submissions on his record, which you like. So as far as prediction goes, this fight is so good. I like both of these guys a lot. I expect this to be a war. I expect both guys landing clean shots. If either guy won by knockout, would not surprise me one bit. But I'm going to go with Song in this back and forth battle. This guy's 23. Like, he seems like a guy that should be 28, 29, 30 because he seems like a guy who's a contender or a top 15 guy. He's only 23. Like, we haven't even seen his prime years yet. So give me Song. I'm going to take him by decision in an absolute war.
Yeah, I mean, first thing I'll say right out the gate is there is a good chance that Song is actually older than 23 and has been cutting age. Just you look at his record, whether here on Sherdog or Tapology. And either he was fighting as a pro at age 15 and a half, which it's not outside the realm of possibility, but I've seen his early fights and he didn't look 15. Like this might be some like Filipino Little League baseball stuff. But even if, say, he is 26 right now, which if I had to guess, I bet he's probably 26. Still tons of upside, still probably hasn't come into like his full power and like physical strength as a combat athlete. Yeah, I'm really high on the guy, and he's at the perfect gym for a guy in his weight range, in particular. And then I love this Arce at bantamweight thing. Like, I remember the Yule fight I picked against Arce. It's like, okay, so you're going to tell me that this kind of muscly guy is going to come back after like 20 months off, and he's going to drop 10 pounds. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. And then he starched Andre Ewell. You used the perfect word. He laid him out. I just don't know if that's going to be, I don't think he'll be able to replicate that against Song. I'm with you. Both these guys, there are some broad similarities in their game, and it should just make for like a wild fight. I expect there to be some great exchanges on the feet. I expect there to be some great work on the ground and in the clinch as well. Obvious fight of the night candidate here, but I'm with you. I lean just slightly towards Song. So give me Song in a decision that probably picks up a little extra cash for both these guys at the end of the night. Third from the top of the UFC Fight Night 197 main card is a matchup that, laugh if you want, is possibly the fight that will put its winner closest to a title shot in their respective division. It is the featherweights, as former title challenger Felicia Spencer welcomes back Leah Letson to the octagon. Spencer, the 30-year-old Canadian by way of Florida, is 8-3 overall. She is 2-3 since joining the UFC as the departing Invicta FC flyweight champ. If 2-3 doesn't sound that impressive, at least know that for the most part, she's fought championship level opposition every time out. She has beaten Megan Anderson and Zara Ferrandos Santos, has lost to Chris Cyborg, Amanda Nunes, and most recently back in May, Norma Dumont, who took a split decision from her at UFC Fight Night Font versus Garbrandt. She'll be welcoming back tough 28 veteran Letson. The 29-year-old Wisconsin native is 5-1 in her mixed martial arts career. She is 1-0 in the UFC. She beat Julia Stolyarenko at the Tough 28 finale all the way back in November of 2018 and promptly disappeared for 3 years. She was rumored to have a couple of fights. She seemed to be following the example of basically the entire rest of the cast of that season and tried to drop to bantamweights. Those fights never panned out for a variety of reasons, but she is finally coming back to the octagon in November of 2021. The odds makers do not think her perfect UFC tally is going to stay that way, as Spencer is minus 290 as the strong favorite, Letson plus 245 as the underdog. This is about it, man. This is two of the last real featherweights. And when I say real featherweight, I basically mean someone who probably can't make 135. Like most of the UFC's so-called featherweight division is 135ers moving up either because they missed weight or just for a brief foray into the division. But these are two of the real featherweights. Spencer, I think Spencer's definitely better than her UFC record looks. Amanda Nunes and Chris Cyborg are going to beat a lot of people, and Norma Dumont actually seems to be growing into much more of a fighter than I thought she was when she debuted. Like, I thought she was going to be 2 losses and gone, and she's actually turned into a good fighter.
She's the UFC main event winner.
UFC main event winner. The prospect crusher, the controversy creator. Like, I want you to tell me what you're doing. Man, that whole Aspen Lad corner thing. Hard to believe that was like less than a month ago. Anyway, Spencer is a wrestler. That's it. Like, she wants to wrestle. She wants she actually has some nice like traditional wrestling type shots. Like, she's not one of the ones that just needs to crash into the clinch, try the headlock throw, or just clinch against the fence and just go for the tip you over thing. Like, she actually shoots from the outside. She shot right through Megan Anderson's hips, like she was, an NCAA champion. Granted, Megan Anderson's legs are longer than Spencer, but she's got that. And she's taking on someone in Letson that I suppose it's possible that Letson has added all new wrinkles to her game in the 3 years she's been gone. I was shocked to realize that she's only 29, that she's actually younger than Spencer. Like, I hadn't thought about Letson in a couple of years, but if you just asked me, I would have, if you'd asked me, 6 months ago, what's up with Leah Letson, I would have said, I guess she's retired, and I would have guessed she's like 33 years old. But Letson, from what I saw on Tough and in her limited number of fights before then, she's a hard punching brawler. Like, she's not a super technically adept striker, but throws with good power. She's just a big woman. Again, I was surprised when she kept trying to make 135 because she seemed like one of the true featherweights. But that's the worst possible game plan to bring in against Felicia Spencer. Like, I don't care if you're a powerful puncher. If she's taken a combined 40 minutes of artillery from Amanda Nunes and Chris Cyborg and didn't get knocked out, Leah Letson's not going to knock her out. So this one's pretty easy and straightforward for me. Spencer is going to come crashing into Letson, take her down. If Letson gets in a couple licks on the way in, that's fine. Spencer's got a chin. We'll take her down with relative ease and either pound her out or choke her out on the ground. Give me Felicia Spencer by first round finish, and I'm going to say submission.
Wow. So, yes, Spencer looked terrible in her last fight against Norma Dumont. The first thing I wrote down in my notes is, like, I wonder if it's because of the beatings that she took from Cyborg and Amanda Nunes, like, they catching up to her. But I think some of it is just what you said. She's a wrestler, and she did not wrestle Norma Dumont. Like, I think she attempted one takedown or two takedowns, and she got a takedown late, but just kind of ran out of time. Mm-hmm. And she's not a great athlete. Say what Spencer. She's not a great athlete. She's kind of flat-footed on the feet. I think I like her on the feet a little bit better than you do, but, like, I'm not throwing her a compliment. She has a Taekwondo background, so she switches stance a lot. She does a lot of push kicks, hook kicks, like unconventional type kicks, side kicks, like the Holly Holm side kick. She does hit hard, as you mentioned. Like, she's also a bigger woman. Her and Letson have, like, very similar frame. Like, they're shorter, stockier, and tend to be nice, like starkier women. But she really struggled with the speed of Dumont, which is kind of like a sign for, if you're a 135 pounder that might be struggling at 135, you might want to move up to 145 because of the speed advantage. It seemed like and it's not many, but like someone like Felicia Spencer might struggle with the speed. She gets hit a lot, Felicia Spencer. She lacks head movement, but as you mentioned, she's very physically strong. She can just grind out in the clinch. She's a good dirty boxer. Like, she slicing elbow. She caught I think it was Chris Cyborg she caught with an elbow inside that Joe Rogan made it sound like Chris Cyborg's weight of like a 50-44 scorecard was extremely close fight because of one elbow. But as you mentioned, she's a good wrestler. I shouldn't say good, but she can shoot, get on top, heavy top pressure though. Like, I think she's a strong grappler. She's a submission threat. On top, she's a top side grappler. If you put her on the back though, she struggles. She struggles to get back up, but she has showed that she has a cardio. Like, even in the last fight, like, she won the last round against Dumont by having the better cardio. Letson, she's such a wild card. I mean, as you mentioned, she's been out for 3 years. Like, you don't know what she got, and when she left, she was 26. So she's at that age she can make a lot of changes. And one, between the age, two, between the time off, that's a long, long time. 3 years. What she left, not a great athlete, southpaw. I would say high output brawler, as you said. Like, she wants to kind of throw down in the pocket, but just win with volume. A lot of kicks. She knocked Elizabeth Phillips out with a beautiful high kick. I think it's more of an outlier though. Like, I don't expect her to see throwing like Marco Crocop high kicks. She can wrestle though. She's not the wrestler that Spencer is, but she will look to get a takedown. But she's not a submission threat in her career. I don't know if she even has a submission on her record. As far as predictions go, I'm going to go with Spencer too. She came in the UFC with more hype than Letson. She's been more active. She's fought better competition. And I agree with you. I think Letson's best chance is probably on the feet, turning into a brawl. But if she puts her on the back, I haven't seen anything from Letson on the back, and we've seen Spencer on top. So give me Spencer. I'm gonna go with decisions. It seems like I don't know if I picked a lot of decisions today. I'm gonna go with decision again. Give me Felicia Spencer by decision.
For the record, through 9 fights so far, you have picked 7 decisions.
There you go. So hopefully, how many stoppages did you pick?
I've only picked 3 stoppages, so I'm only 1 ahead of you. But Keith is really trying to get his money's worth out of this card.
You know what? Yeah, we got to get some time. We only have 11 fights. We're going to try to stretch it out to the time that 14 fights would be. And you know what? We kind of been spoiled last week with all the stoppages and actually the last 2 weeks have been really good cards. So
yes,
we got to suffer through one.
Speaking of suffering, the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 197, the only heavyweight matchup on the card, features Ben Rothwell and Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Rothwell, the 40-year-old Wisconsin native, still going, is 39-13 over his well-traveled career. He's 9-7 since joining the UFC after the collapse of IFL and various other promotions of the early teens. He's fought most recently in May, taking a second-round submission win over Man of the Month Chris Barnett at UFC Fight Night Font versus Garbrandt. Prior to that, he dropped a unanimous decision to Martin Tybura last October. He's taking on De Lima. The 36-year-old Brazilian is 18-7-1 overall. He's 7-5 in the UFC. Notably, he is 3-2 since moving up to heavyweight from light heavyweight. He fought most recently back in May, taking a unanimous decision over Maurice Green at UFC on ESPN, Rodriguez versus Watterson. That allowed him to bounce back from his loss to Alexander Romanov last November. Rothwell is the slight favorite here. He is minus 150. De Lima plus 130 as the slightest of underdogs. Man. Now, if you're watching this program, you may have remembered me last week saying that Chris Barnett versus John Vellante was going to be the anti-fight of the night, guaranteed wretched viewing experience. So obviously I was proven wrong there. Happy to be proven wrong. Sue me. I didn't think the crazy stuff that Chris Barnett did on the regional circuit would actually translate against even John Vellante, but it did, and I'm happy to be wrong. But here I am, putting my neck out again and saying that this fight just has yuck written all over it. Ben Rothwell, some of the same things I actually said about Vellante last week. Like, Rothwell's physical gifts are gone. The thing that used to stand out about Ben Rothwell 10 years ago is that for one of the biggest heavyweights in the sport, how kind of nimble and coordinated he was. Like, not as slow on the feet as you would expect from a guy that looks like Sasquatch. Better hand speed than you would expect from. And I've been in the room with a good number of UFC heavyweights. Rothwell is one of the ones where as soon as he enters the room, even just out of the corner, you go, who the hell? And it's Ben Rothwell. It just looks like an NFL lineman walking into the room. Like, I don't know how much weight he cuts to get to 265, but I suspect it's a not insignificant amount. But that's all gone. Like, he is now as slow as he probably should have been all along. His gas tank is not great, and that's even with him fighting at a miserably slow pace to try and conserve it. Yet, despite all that, he's still pretty defensively sound, and he's still huge and strong. And that adds up to kind of what I said about Vellante last week. He's a guy that he doesn't have enough gas to make his game go, but he's tough enough that he, like, the even a younger, fresher fighter can't always get him out of there. Like the Tybura fight was awful. The Ovin St. Preux fight was awful. And he's taking on a guy in Marcos Rogerio de Lima who, he's just the other half of a bad heavyweight fight. The funny thing about him at light heavyweight, and when you look at him now, you're like, that dude made light heavyweight, because as soon as he moved up in weight, he just, like, like doubled in size. But he used to be a go for broke guy. He seemed to think, okay, I cut a ton of weight to get to 205. I know I don't have a gas tank, so I'm going to throw everything I have at this guy in the first round and see if I can just get this thing over with before I gas out. And so he'd either get a first round finish, lose in the first round, or gas out horribly and lose late. Like he was pretty fun watching at light heavyweight. That's all gone away at heavyweight. He is just slow, plodding striker, miserable, like maybe the worst ground game in the heavyweight division, which think about that for a sec. I know, like, think of how I talk about Greg Hardy and then listen to me say, this guy might have the worst ground game in the heavyweight division.
And the broadcast will talk about him like he's a grappler too.
Well, he's Brazilian. He must have a black belt.
That's right.
He is terrible defensive wrestler, and again, he's just like a turtle that's been flipped on his back. Not only can he not get up, he doesn't even know where to start. I mean, he has good power. He had power at light heavyweight. It's translated to heavyweight, but the only place you really see it is he still throws really hard kicks. That's about it. If this thing gets a finish, it's probably going to be Rothwell landing on top in some kind of wild scramble, because I don't think either guy's going to try to bring it to the ground, but it'll be Rothwell landing on top and just him pounding out De Lima or slapping on an arm triangle or something. But I'm not picking that to happen. Just give me Rothwell in a 3-round decision that's kind of plodding and kind of dull.
Yeah. So while you were talking, I was thinking about Ben Rothwell. What were you talking about? I said, like, while we were on a break, I said, God, I want him to retire. Like, what's the point? Like, he doesn't have a fan base. UFC doesn't get anything out of him. And then I just thinking about 2 weeks ago, Glover Teixeira just won the title, and I'm just sure Ben Rothwell gets like motivated by that. Like, this is his chance, and I'm like, oh no, like he's not gonna retire anytime soon because Glover Teixeira won the title. He's a big burly heavyweight who's never a great athlete, but I agree with you saying he was faster than he was. He has a really herky-jerky, weird style to his game now where he dips to one side, throws on the other side, a lot of arm punches. He's a huge guy, so he still has some kind of power. But you mentioned, I think his output is a little bit better than you think, but the threat is not there for 15 minutes, if that makes sense. It's like slappy punches, awkward, not hurting anybody. But he continues to move forward, plodding along. Kicks used to be a big part of his game. That's gone. Like, he doesn't throw kicks anymore. But he still has good takedown defense. He's hard to take down. I think it was just a size thing with him. And he has a submission threat. He's always his submissions come from like weird things, like like a 10-finger guillotine or something like this. Like, he's gonna attack your head. Rogerio, as you mentioned, he used to be a light heavyweight. Now he's a guy that has a cut weight to 265. He's wild. He throws hard. He does have some kicks. He has some hard kicks. I think he actually is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I think I heard that in the broadcast. That might be me just guessing again. That might be me stereotyping, but I really think he is. But he's a terrible. You mentioned he's a terrible grappler. Like Alexander Romanov submitted him, like just like bullied him into a choke.
Forearm choke.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, it was just like, I thought it's just like, I'm bigger, like Big Brother choked him.
Oh, completely.
So he does have 12 knockouts, but a lot of those were at light heavyweight. So as far as prediction goes, I have no idea who wins. I'm worried about both these guys. Rothwell looks really ugly and slow now, and really looks every bit of his age. De Lima just looks fat, and I wonder about his motivation. He has that John Volante body with him, where he's a 205 pounder that's carrying like 60 pounds too much. I'm gonna go with Rothwell because he has the experience and he's still pretty good submission artist. Again, I don't know if he gets it there, but I could see some kind of weird thing. De Lima throwing a kick that he slips on, something where Rothwell ends up on top, and then Rothwell finds a finish when he does. So I'll say Rothwell wins by second round submission, and just some weird submission. Just not one we normally see, just some weird one.
Man, October 2009, Cain Velasquez. That's the last person to just run straight through Ben Rothwell. That's how much he's just kind of capable of slowing down a fight. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
In fairness, he did have some time off in there, but yeah. No one like just beats the hell out of Ben Rothwell.
no, he's like just a surprisingly tough fighter to look great against. That brings us to the main event, a scheduled 5 rounds of featherweight action between former champ Max Holloway and Yair Rodriguez. Holloway, the 29-year-old Hawaiian, is 22-6 overall. He's 18-6 in the UFC, is coming off a win in his last appearance. That was back in January at UFC on ABC 1, where he took a dominant 5-round decision over Calvin Kattar in the main event, shattering the UFC record for significant strikes landed in a fight, shattering his own record. And he also holds the 3rd place spot. But I think he landed like 500 strikes in that fight. That allowed him to bounce back from back-to-back title fight losses to current champ Alexander Volkanovski, both of which were close and one of which was extremely close. At any rate, it is Holloway on what may be a long track back to a 3rd crack at that title for as long as Alexander the Great is holding it. He'll be taking on Rodriguez. The 29-year-old Mexican is 13-2 with 1 no contest overall. He is 8-1 with 1 no contest in the UFC. Hasn't fought in a little over 2 years. His last appearance was a unanimous decision win over Jeremy Stevens at UFC on ESPN, Reyes versus Weidman in October of 2019. That was them running it back after their first meeting atop the UFC's Mexico City card in September of 2019, ended in 15 seconds with an inadvertent eye poke. Holloway, a prohibitive favorite here. Sherdog associate editor Jay Petrie and I were just kind of brainstorming when was the last time there was this big a favorite in a UFC main event that wasn't a title fight or a short notice booking. And it's been a while. Holloway right now minus 650, Rodriguez plus 475 on the comeback. I think, anybody who's big enough as big a fan of mixed martial arts, to be watching our show, probably has a handle on Holloway's recent history. He was the featherweight champ. He, was cruising into probably one of the top 3 pound for pound fighters in the sport, ran into Volkanovski and lost those 2 close fights. And just now it's a matter of, the road back, Rodriguez is a more interesting one. It's crazy how much, to me, the public perception and the public narrative about Yair Rodriguez has changed in the last 3 or 4 years. Say 4 years ago, like after his loss to Frankie Edgar, even though that was his first loss in the UFC and it was a bad one, Edgar mauled him on the ground. I think he was a fan favorite because his fights were just generally super exciting. He was young. The UFC was clearly behind him. He came back from that loss to Edgar, and he and Korean Zombie put on a fight of the year candidate, and he finished that fight with one of the most memorable knockouts of any year. It wasn't ballet, it wasn't poetry in motion, but it was a sick knockout, and it turned a loss into a win with 1 second left on the clock. Like he was going to lose a decision if that fight went 1 more second, like even if Jung got back up, probably. So they booked him with Stevens for their to headline their Mexico City card. That tells you right there, like, what a big deal Yair Rodriguez was to the UFC, because you know how badly they want to conquer Mexico and the Spanish-speaking market in general. He was headlining the card, and it's been all downhill from there. Like, there was the eye poke in 15 seconds. He gave a bad look by basically egging on the crowd to, like, boo Stevens for not being able to continue, which, like, whatever. Fighters do tactless and tasteless stuff.
That's when they were throwing stuff in.
Yeah, like bottles and stuff were landing. Like, it was an ugly look, but honestly,
Brandon Fitzgerald was hiding underneath the desk and stuff. Yeah,
that's right. Brendan Fitzgerald was hiding under the desk. like I remember, like, Bisping tweeted out a picture of Brendan hiding. I'm not proud. I'd be hiding under the desk too. But like, obviously that was a bad look, but fighters do tactless and tasteless stuff all the time, and they live to tell about it. The worst thing it did for him was it locked him into a rematch with Stevens, who was a guy like ranked well behind him that was basically only booked in the first place to be kind of like a winnable action fight in Mexico City and get the fans all charged up. So
That's
he
right.
ruined his own 2019. But in between all that, there was the thing of him getting cut by the UFC as their kind of strong arm tactic to get him booked. And because Dana, he couldn't help from getting on the podium and being just like, well, he must be scared to fight. The kind of fans that believe that shit ran with it. And ever since then, like, Rodriguez has been out for 2 years, sometimes because of his own injuries, sometimes because of injuries to his scheduled opponents. Like, this is several times now they've tried to make this Holloway fight. They tried to make a fight with Zabit Magomedsharipov several times. Yeah. But because those are some of our last memories of him, there's a segment of fans that while he's gone, just the idea festers that, okay, he's scared to fight or he was never that good. And I don't think either of those things is true.
It's just, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
Just think for how dumb that is. He's scared to fight, but he's scheduled to fight Max Holloway, the guy that you just said landed the most significant strikes, the top 3, I believe you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe he's the owner of the top 3 spots.
Anybody who just said Yair Rodriguez is like, that's one of the dumbest things you possibly could say on earth. Like, he's fighting Mike freaking Holloway.
Yeah.
Like, and even like the ones like you want to say step down. Jimmy Stevens is famous for like crushing. Like, Jimmy Stevens crushed Josh Emmett's face.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. Go on.
I'm completely with you on this. Like, and
he's just so stupid when fans say, "Oh, this guy's scared." No one's scared. These are the best dudes on the planet.
He's one of the baddest dudes on the planet. And for what it's worth, like, obviously the UFC had a sour taste on him. They did that whole "we cut you and then we re-sign you 3 weeks later" when you knuckle under and agree to our terms. But all the things that he seemed to be in line for in 2017 are still there for the taking. The UFC still really, really wants Spanish-speaking native Latino superstars and champions. There's still always a place for blood and guts action fighters.
Imagine if he actually did leave the UFC at that time and he joined the Bellator featherweight tournament. And now obviously it would have worked out with all the injuries and whatnot, but imagine if he was in that.
Dude, like, so many of those matchups would have been ridiculous. Him versus Pitbull, him versus McKee.
Imagine him versus McKee now. Oh.
But
anyways,
imagine
the UFC thinking we got to go from Ben Rothwell to Yair Rodriguez. Talk about jumping athleticism. Okay, sorry.
I mean, it's all there for the taking still. Like, he's still only 29 years old. Like, sometimes it's hard for me to believe that Max Holloway is only 29 just because he's been in the UFC since he was 20. It just feels like he's been there forever. And with Rodriguez, it's hard for me to believe he's 29 just because it feels like 10 years that he's been on the shelf just because he's had such a weird run. But it's all still there for the taking. It just, you have to win, you have to be exciting, and you have to be around often enough to stay in people's mind. I think it's a tall ask for him to beat Max Holloway this weekend. And, we'll get to my pick and your pick in a minute, but I made the argument in my column this week that it's even a win of sorts if he just goes out there and puts on a blood and guts battle that at least reminds fans why he was so beloved in the first place, why the UFC was willing to put so much muscle behind him in the first place, and just shut up for good anyone who thought that his refusal to step up on short notice and fight to beat Magomedsharipov was because he was scared of anything. But having said that, the things that Yair Rodriguez does well do not play well into Max Holloway's strengths.
Can I interrupt you real quick, though?
Please.
I understand where you're going with, I mean, it seems like where you're going with prediction, but the negative 650, when you talked about the elbow that he landed against the Korean Zombie, that alone, the ability to do a move like that to end a fight, probably the only person, there's 7 billion people in the world, probably the only person in the world that could land that strike, do something like that. That right there should not make Max Holloway a negative 650 favorite.
Yeah.
Everything you said in the build-up tells you why Max Holloway should be a favorite and probably a significant favorite. But 650 is insane.
I agree
Carry on.
because
Sorry.
not only did he do that, but he did that at the end of a furious 5-round fight.
Mhm.
You know,
If
so
if Yair Rodriguez landed a high kick to open up the fight and knocked out Marc, we'd all be surprised. But
mhm,
he definitely has the ability to do that. Like it's
yes,
like negative 650 should be Amanda Nunes versus Leah Letson. Like that should be negative 650. No, Yair Rodriguez is still one of the top 10 best featherweights in the world.
he is.
So, anyways, carry on.
He's one of the top 10 best featherweights in the world. He
But
is.
we just saw what Max Holloway did to Calvin Cannon. You could also say the same thing about. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I'm going to mute now.
Yeah, you're, and that's my problem. You know, remembering what Holloway did to Cater, remembering what Holloway did to Brian Ortega, what he did to Jose Aldo twice, what he did to Anthony Pettis, because none of those were first round startings. All of those were Holloway doing the Holloway thing, where it's not that he's not a slow or deliberate starter, but he is like you like to talk about builders. He's definitely a builder. Like he is like a giant avalanche or like a giant snowball starting to roll downhill, where it's not just that he doesn't get tired, but he seems to draw energy from seeing his opponent start to flag. And that's when he starts to launch these 7, 8, 9 strike combinations where he's throwing punches with both hands, mixing in kicks, switching stances like as he steps forward with kicks. I mean, it's just like a combine harvester, just like mowing down a field of grain. And it's overwhelmed some of the best strikers in the division. Rodriguez, he probably throws harder, like in terms of just single strike impact than Holloway. Like he is a one-shot knockout guy. He throws a great variety of strikes. Obviously, he has he was head kicking everybody for a while, but he throws hard kicks to all levels. He throws really hard punches. The combinations aren't quite as pretty as Holloway's, not quite as accurate. And he does have 5-round cardio, again, as evidenced by the zombie fights. But I don't know if he has 5 rounds against Holloway cardio. Just that's a different thing. Because he, like, if you had like a stamina bar for him and Korean Zombie, there's like kind of went down at the same speed. Like it was a furious fight the whole time, but they kind of slowed down at the same pace. Holloway doesn't do that. If you start to slow down, he'll pick up speed. And that's what I see happening here. I think this is going to be a great fight for as long as it lasts. I wouldn't be surprised if Rodriguez wins one or both of the first 2 rounds. I mean, Jose Aldo won the first round both times against Max Holloway, and Holloway ended up destroying him by the end of the third. So I think this will be a great fight. I think, like I'd say, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Rodriguez has the momentum early on, if he has the lead going into the third round, if he has hurt Holloway a couple times. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he like lances Holloway with the same kind of head kick that knocked out BJ Penn, and I forget who else it was he knocked out like right before that. Andre Feely. But I think Holloway, with his just all-timer of a rugged chin, will be able to shrug that off, come back and keep fighting. By the middle of the third round, Holloway is going to take over, and give me Holloway by 4th round TKO, just an accumulation of damage. Another one for the top 10 all-time strikes landed record list, but Holloway will just continue to make his case for another shot at Alexander Volkanovski.
Yeah, so let me ask you 2 questions before I give my pick. Now, you talked about the ongoing relationship Yair Rodriguez has with the UFC, and that obviously it's not good. But would it be good for the UFC if Yair Rodriguez won?
Yes.
Okay. Because Holloway has this star quality to him. Like everyone loves him. No one dislikes Holloway. He's the Hawaiian Islands thing. He's just cool. Like, but yeah, I agree. Like, just
I mean, he's got his kid, little Max, like telling Dad which round to finish it in. He's throwing no look like jabs in Calvin Kattar's face and talking to Dana White. Like Max Holloway is a star.
If Max Holloway beat Alex Volkanovski and this was a title fight, I might say no. But being that he didn't beat Alex up, I know there's a debate to that, but I think I scored Volkanovski. I think you did too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but either way, it was close, right? They just need new blood. A third fight with Alexander Volkanovski, like, it just doesn't sell.
Yep.
And yeah, I think they just need a new guy. So that was my first question. My second question is, I'm listening to you break down. I think your breakdown is perfect. Yeah, I'm listening to you break down the fight, and I kept thinking about Petr Yan versus Corey Sandhagen. Is that how you kind of picturing it, where Rodriguez playing the Sandhagen role?
Yeah. A
They're
more
both
dangerous guy in terms of,
similar. I mean, Rodriguez is obviously a lot more flashy than Sandhagen. Kick, but like similar build, movement, kicks, and then Holloway's just that. As Petr Yan, very similar, where their boxing game is to not win a round. The boxing game is to punish you and win the entire fight.
Yeah.
You know that. So I have a few fighters that I just love doing film study on. My favorite guy is Israel Adesanya, but I don't know. Watching film study of Max Holloway this week, that might have changed. He's really his former opponent Alex Volkanovski is a guy who I've really enjoyed watching him. AJ McKee when I was doing the previews for the beginning of the Bellator previews. By the way, people forget I did pick AJ McKee to win that one, but before it was cool. But and I said AJ McKee was the future star of Bellator, which that's not too good of a prediction, but like he was one of them. Petr Yan is one of them, but Max Holloway is definitely one of the most fun guys to watch because he just has so many layers to his game. You talk about him being a pressure fighter; he's a pressure striker. Like, how do you? I think you're breaking down saying Yair Rodriguez has the cardio to go 25 minutes, but he doesn't have the cardio to go 25 Max Holloway minutes.
Exactly.
That's perfect. Like, I couldn't imagine if you're training a fighter for Max Holloway and you say, "All right, we got to pick up our cardio." What is it? To me, it's like, oh, coach, how does people do sprints? You know, sprints is a good way to get your cardio up. That fast, what do they call it? Not aerobic workout, the anaerobic workout. And they're like, hey, we're gonna do 40-yard dash. We're gonna do 20 of them. We're gonna sprint all the way down, slow jog back, do it again. Like training for Max Holloway, be like, hey, it's 25 minutes. No, you got to sprint for 25 minutes. Like just run and keep. No, not slow jog. You sprint because that's how basically fight Max Holloway is.
And up a hill. Because it's only going to get harder as you.
Yeah, and every like for 5 miles, every mile you got to put an extra weight on your back because Max Holloway is going to turn it up even more. Insane volume. He is one of the Max Holloway. Obviously, I'm talking about still. Max Holloway, one of the best, if not the best boxer in the UFC. I was in one of these like Facebook groups, and they asked the question of, all the different pictures, and it's like, Fiziev is a guy that doesn't get credit, but he would be in it. But when it comes to straight boxing, to me, it's like probably Holloway or Petr Yan. And if Max Holloway had one punch knockout power, if he had that just end the fight with one shot, it'd be a no-brainer that he's the best boxer in MMA.
Like, let me throw one thing out here real quick. Because in the middle of towards the end of the Cater fight, when he was really just styling and feeling himself, and he threw the no-look thing, what he yelled at Dana White was, I'm the best boxer in the featherweight division. It's like, dude, we already knew that. Like, aim high. Like, he's so humble.
The thing going into that was that Cater saying he was the best. So that was,
dude, I'm really? I'm the best boxer in the UFC. So at least people have something to debate. Like,
well, that's like, and aside, I would piss some people off, but like when people want to debate Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback, and I'm like, wait, we're still having the greatest quarterback debate? Like quarterback? Like, that's like how I feel about Holloway. Like we're debating the divisional boxing. Like, no, Brady's not the best quarterback ever. Like, yeah, obviously he is. Like, he's the greatest football player ever. And I'm beyond that now. I'm like, no, he's the greatest team sports player ever. Like, wait a minute, we're still doing a quarterback debate? Like, that's how I feel with Max Holloway. Anyways, back. So we talk about him being a bit of a slow starter, and as you mentioned, he's a builder. And when the train starts rolling, forget it. Like, there's no stopping it. But to his credit, I think he realized how much of a slow start, and he really picked up the pace his last two fights. The second fight, Volkanovski, he won the first round. He came out. I don't remember if he won the first round against. I think he probably did against Cater, but he also picked up the pace in that fight. You talked about stance switches. Besides fighting out of both stances, I love that he'll throw a combination one stance and then completely change to the other stance. So now and then attack with a completely different combo on that side. So he always gets you. You don't know which side. You feel like fighting Max Holloway must feel like that when a goalie is warming up like the hockey team and the team takes a shot and he's got to move this way, then this way, and then they keep, the teams are just shooting shots at him. He can fight from every range, which is so impressive. I mean, from all the way out, he just pick your pot, mid range, he's moving in, come in the pocket, he's got good power. He just touches, and then when an opening's there, he unloads big shots. His straight right is like a deadly piston. He throws combinations. I want to back up when I said throw combinations. What I love about Max Holloway, it seems like every fight there's this new combination that works for him that we haven't seen in other fights. And he's like so intelligent. He attacks the body. He does have some He actually stands up pretty tall for a guy, and that is being just taller. And he struggled with Volkanovski feints. He kind of froze. Into Volkanovski's credit, and I said it last time, like he kept freezing Max Holloway with the feints. Volkanovski did very well at slowing the pace down. That's what happened in that first fight. Is Max Holloway and the leg kicks and all the Volkanovski did a lot of stuff. Kind of guessing, kind of made Max Holloway be very defensive, but it also he fought at a much different pace. He fought at the pace that Volkanovski wanted to fight, which was huge. Also, the leg kicks were where he was taking out Max Holloway's legs, but Max Holloway's, to his credit, in the second fight, he was throwing more leg kicks. We need to see more leg kicks out of him. Great takedown defense. Like, it's so hard to take down Max Holloway. You try to take him down, he's gonna be launching tight guillotine, and then the cardio to go 25 minutes. I mean, it's insane. And we always talk about his cardio. We also I want to throw out there is his heart. Like, he's been in battles, Poirier fight, Volkanovski's fight, and even like the Poirier fight where it seemed like he was going to be put out, he made a comeback and almost won that fight. Now, move over to Yair Rodriguez. I agree that Yair is being grossly overlooked. The 2-year layoff. This guy is so athletic. He's as athletic as anybody I've ever seen in the sport. I love his work from distance. He's got good output, and his kicking game is sensational. I was there in Boston when he fought Jeremy Stephens, but even more impressive than that, a couple days earlier when they did the open workouts, I was right against the ring, and I'm filming stuff for Sherdog, and I'm so close to him. And right before him, Dominic Reyes was hitting pads, and this is a guy who's known for his kicking, Dominic Reyes, and he's a light heavyweight, and it was like a incredible sound. Then Yair Rodriguez came out, and he was at least just as loud, which was like, holy crap. Like, this guy's kicks, besides like how fast they have so much power, and then there's so much variety in his kicks. He'll come up with a teep kick, then he'll turn into like a hard crushing body kick, then he'll throw it in the oblique kick, then he'll throw like a Holly Holm side kick. I like that he uses his kicks also to set up his boxing game. I've heard people say that he's a better boxer than he's credit with. I actually think the opposite. I actually think he's a little bit wild on the boxing, but it works because he can set it up with his kicks. He can kind of back him up with kick, and then all of a sudden large something. Obviously, you got to avoid the spinning attacks. I heard someone say, I think it was Joe Rogan or somebody, says it's so hard to plan for Yair Rodriguez because it's hard to predict what he's going to do because he doesn't even know what he's going to do. And that's a really good way to describe it. Spinning attacks, obviously aerial attacks. He'll throw like a flying knee, stuff like that. But weak takedown defense. Going against Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens took him down a couple of times in that second fight. So that's an issue. But he throws up submissions off his back. I would be really surprised if he submitted Max Holloway or if they went to the ground at all, but you never know. He has gone 25 minutes, and that was at a good pace against the Korean Zombie, but he slowed down in the second Jeremy Stephens fight. And that was a lot more wrestling heavy. And in the second round, he kind of tried. If you remember, he had Jeremy Stephens hurt bad. He was trying to finish it. So I think that might be, just adjusting your pace. And I know a lot of people say, oh, he really, really was gassed out in a 15-minute fight. How could he go 25? I always want to say this, and I know I'm a broken record, but in case we have new listeners, do not judge a fighter gassing out at 15 minutes on a 25-minute fight because you fight differently. The guy knew he only had 2 minutes left, so he can go all out than if he had 12 minutes left. It's different. So as far as prediction goes, you seem very confident in Max Holloway. I am too. I mean, I know I was trying to build a suspense who I was taking, but I think people could tell by the way I broke him down. I think there's a good chance he loses the first round, especially with the kicking game adjusting to the kicks. And that right there is one reason why I think negative 650 is crazy. Like, you give up the first round, well, Yair only has to split the next four. But splitting the next four against Max Holloway as the Bulls general is close to impossible. I think Max Holloway just smothers the kicking game of Yair. I think he forced him to fight on his back foot. I mean, Korean Zombie was boxing him up with that strategy. And the Korean Zombie, and if it wasn't for that Hail Mary, if that Hail Mary went there and he lost the decision to Korean Zombie, and I think he'd probably be a negative 800 favorite, because we saw what would happen. Talking about Holloway would be like a negative 800 favorite, being when we saw someone with a similar kind of boxing game as Holloway. I mean, probably a bit bigger hitter, but similar boxing game. And Holloway kind of do the same thing. I think Holloway's going to make a statement. I think he wants to make a statement. I think he wants to remind people that he's the best featherweight in the world. I think he might have did it against Calvin Kattar. I think he's making another statement. I think he's going to box him up. I agree with you. I think he's going to take over midway through the fight. It's going to be too much. I think Rodriguez is going to slow down, and that's when Holloway just picks it up. The gap in the output's going to change. And give me Holloway. I think Holloway's going to get a knockout too. So give me Holloway. I think he's going to finish it in the third round.
There you have it. 2 picks for Max Holloway to get the stoppage against Yair Rodriguez in the main event of UFC Fight Night 197. That's it. 11 fights up, 11 fights down. You have our picks, our predictions. If you would like to hear our reactions after the fights, which I assure you they're worth your time, check us out on the Sherdog front page, or just go directly to the Sherdog YouTube page, where we will be recapping all of these fights, talking about the implications, possible matchmaking, and any storylines and things of interest that cropped up. We will take your questions, your comments, your hot takes. So join us just right after the main event. Between now and then.
Yeah. Ben, can I just jump in?
Please.
I want to give our listeners 5 things they can do in the meantime for between now and Saturday. 1, like this video. 2, comment, say something nice, don't say something mean. 3, share this video. 4, subscribe to Sherdog if you haven't already. And number 5, check out Ben's sweet hat. You can go over to the Sherdog store and get one of those sweet hats for yourself.
There you have it. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you on Saturday.